Hey everyone, welcome to the top 10 list. Welcome to my top 10 worst movies of the 1990s. Yes, you saw my last videos, I did my top 10 worst movies of the decade, worst movies of the 2000s. Now it's the 90s turn. Yes, from 1990 to 1999, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 worst movies that came out during this era. And this was pretty difficult because a lot of fucking terrible movies came out in the 90s. So yeah, with a lot of thinking, a lot of processing, I came out with the top 10 worst movies of the 90s in my opinion. This was hard, and some people might disagree, but again, it's all opinion. So yeah, let's get to it. Here's my top 10 worst movies of the 1990s. And for a top 10 list, you gotta have your dishonorable mentions. My dishonorable mentions are Super Mario Bros., Godzilla, Kazam, Showgirls, Waterworld, Street Fighter, Highlander 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, and Batman Forever. I know everyone's thinking, wait. All of those are dishonorable mentions. None of those. Those are some of the worst movies ever. None of them made your top 10 list. No. These 10 films are actually worse, in my opinion. So yeah, let's get to it. Those movies are terrible. Just gonna be the top 10 list. But what didn't make my top 10 was my number 10. And my number 10 is Robocop 3. Wow. Robocop 3. Robocop 2 was bad enough. Robocop 3 is even worse. The effects, the villain, I have no idea why they kept going with Robocop. The first Robocop was good enough. Amazing. Paul Verhoeven, how he directed the movie, is amazing. Peter Weller, so good. Nancy Allen, love it. I love even Kurtwood Smith. He's so good in this movie. As Clarence, he's great. Dick Jones is awesome. Ronnie Cox. Everything about Robocop is great. It's a political satire, also a great action thriller science fiction film. The second one tried to do what the first one did, and it failed horribly. This one tries to do its own thing, and it's fucking ridiculous. The effects, the acting, everything about the action is so choppy. Nothing about it makes... Nothing about this movie makes sense, and it's one of the worst action sequels of all time, hands down. Coming in number 9 is Speed 2 Cruise Control. Yep, speaking of some of the worst action sequels, here we go. Here's another one. One of the worst of all time. Speed was such a great movie with Keanu Reeves. You got Dennis Hopper. You got Jeff Daniels. One of the first performances of Sandra Bullock, who's great. They thought, you know what? Let's put Sandra Bullock in the lead and call it Speed 2 and put it on a fucking boat. No. The action is awful, the villain is awful, the performances are awful, the editing, oh my god, just some of the situations that they go through in this movie, I won't even spoil it. It's fucking ridiculous. You're laughing at the sheer stupidity, but you're also annoyed because you just love the first Speed so much, and you just hate that this is actually part of a Speed franchise because it's a sequel, and it's nowhere near as good as the first one. This one is just god-awful. Just awful. Coming number 8 is Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Yes, the first one wasn't that great. It's not a terrible movie, but it's definitely not a good movie. This one's terrible. This one feels like an actual terrible video game movie with its cheesy effects, its horrible hokey acting, the fucking fighting that looks like ballerina dances. Barely anyone fights in this movie. Everyone just does flips and turns and stuff. I feel like I'm watching a ballet recital. This movie's stupid. Some of the actors didn't even return from the first one. They didn't even return for this one. The only people that returned was Liu Kang and Princess Katana. I think that's fucking it. Everyone else didn't. No one even wanted to return for this. No one even gave a shit about the project. This is just terrible. You got Shao Kahn in this movie. It is glorious. He's awful. Especially at the ending when they do their animalities. That is some of the worst effects I've ever seen in a movie. It is fucking awful. The characters aren't done right. Again, it's not an R-rated Mortal Kombat movie. You want to make a good Mortal Kombat movie? Make it R-rated. The first one wasn't that great, but this was beyond worse. Coming number 7 is Troll 2. Yes. Oh my god, they're eating her. Oh my god. This movie knows it's bad. That's what I give it credit for. This would be in my top 3, because it's fucking awful. It's one of the worst horror movies, again, ever made. The effects are terrible. The acting is probably some of the worst acting in a horror film. The monsters, just ridiculous. Everything about this movie is sheer stupidity. But the movie is very self-aware how awful it is. The first Troll movie was fucking terrible, but this is even worse. Nothing about this movie works. But again, you can at least laugh at it, so I give it that, but it's still awful. Coming number 6 is Biodome. Biodome is probably one of the worst comedies ever made. It's probably in the top 5 worst comedies I've ever seen. This has Pauly Shore and Stephen Baldwin. Oh my god. Just watching these two trying to make you laugh is unbearable. You just want to like rip your ears out, rip your eyes out. And the fact that Tenacious D is Jack Black and Kyle Gass are in this movie in one scene, I'm like, why are they a cameo? Why did they just make them the lead fucking characters? I hated this movie. This movie is so dumb. It's about these two morons that go into this dome, and it's a science experiment, and they like ruin these scientists' work, and they ruin their fucking lives. There's even a scene they almost like rape these girls, and it's supposed to be funny and wacky. It's not funny and wacky. Oh, this movie's awful. This movie will almost give you brain damage because of how dumb and stupid this movie is. You're just like, oh my god, just what is this movie ending? It's that bad. It's that bad. When you watch a Pauly Shore movie, it is probably some of the worst comedy you'll ever see. Like, thank God he never had a career after his few movies, but this is hands down the worst Pauly Shore movie. Coming number 5 is Rocky V. Yes, I love Rocky. Everyone knows that I'm a big Rocky fan. Yo, Adrian! I love it. I love all the movies, except this one. I even love the ridiculous 4th one, and even the forgettable 3rd one. Even though it's forgettable, but it's still a good movie. This one is pretty bad. This one's awful. This is probably actually like my least favorite sports movie. I really don't like this. Just doesn't feel like a Rocky movie, and that's why I despise it so much. There's nothing in this movie I really like. I don't even like Sylvester Stallone's performance. I don't think he's good in this movie. I think he's way out of character in the movie. I think Paulie's out of character. I hate that there's no match. It's a street fight at the end of the movie, which makes no sense. Just a lot of the characters and the interactions of the characters, they don't feel like a Rocky movie. I felt like this was like a fan-made movie or something. It just didn't feel like a Rocky movie. These characters didn't feel like Rocky characters. Everyone was so out of character. It didn't make sense. It felt like a multi-universe movie. I'm like, this movie is just so dumb. It doesn't make sense. It really does not. And again, these characters don't feel like the Rocky characters. The story there's no inspiration in this movie. There's no good fight scenes in this movie. There's not even really good performances in the movie as well. So, hands down, one of the worst Rocky movies, or the worst Rocky movie, and one of the worst movies of the 90s, in my opinion. I just don't like this movie. Coming number 4 is Steel. Yes, before Iron Man, we had Steel, Shaquille O'Neal as a superhero, mecha superhero. Anytime Shaquille O'Neal did a fucking movie, it was always a complete joke. This is the biggest joke of them all. This is such a dumb movie, with a really dumb idea, a dumb premise, a horrible lead character, horrible villain, horrible action scenes, horrible special effects, and just horrible everything. Everything about this movie is just wrong. Just wrong. Thank God we have good superhero movies now, because the 90s, they had a lot of bad ones, and Steel was one of the worst ones. Coming number 3 is The Crow, City of Angels. Oh my god, why did they do this? Why did they make a sequel to The Crow? Brandon Lee died. Why make a sequel? Again, like I said, the 90s, shitty superhero movies. The Crow, amazing. How Alex Pointis directed that movie, how Brandon Lee played the lead role, it was so freaking good. So good. So good. This one, awful. Just awful. I never even saw the 3rd one because this one just pissed me off so much. It really did. Like, this is such an insult to the first Crow movie. The action is terrible. The actor they got to play the lead isn't the Crow. Brandon Lee is the Crow. This is not the frickin' Crow. This isn't. The style, the substance, the story, the writing, nothing about this movie is the Crow. It's nothing. Like, I don't want them to remake The Crow because The Crow was just this thing that you can only make once. It's like Big Trouble in Little China. You can't make it again. There's only one Big Trouble in Little China, and there's only one Crow. Like, you can't do it again. You can't repeat it. You can't make a remake or a sequel. And this movie is the exact reason why you can't do it. This movie is wrong in every sense of the way. The writing, direction, performances, everything about this movie was done horribly. Hands down one of my least favorite movies and one of the worst movies of the 90s. Coming number 2 is Batman and Robin. Yes, of course. How can we not forget the worst movie of the 90s? Batman and Robin. Never leave the cape without it. Freeze, I'm Batman. George Clooney. George Clooney's a great actor. He's actually a good choice to play Batman. Just Joel Schumacher didn't know what the fuck he was doing. Batman Forever was awful. One of the worst superhero movies. Hands down terrible. Just awful. Awful, awful, awful. This is every reason, every word's worse. This is just so terrible. The costumes look ridiculous with the bat nipples and the bat ass. Just awful. The costumes, like, the Mr. Freeze doesn't look like Mr. Freeze. Poison Ivy and Bane. Boom. Boom. Monkey work. This movie's stupid. It's awful. It's got over-the-top acting. I'm afraid you have to die. Ah! This movie. Uma Thurman was terrible. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Chris O'Donnell, George Clooney, Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl. Everything about this movie's terrible. The ending doesn't make sense, but whatever. How Mr. Freeze becomes like a good guy at the ending makes no goddamn sense. Nothing about this movie makes sense. The story is ridiculous and beyond campy. Thank God Christopher Nolan came and saved the Batman franchise with Batman Begins, because Batman and Robin we thought it was the end of Batman, because this movie was so bad and such a flop, we thought Batman was done. Thank God for Christopher Nolan, because this movie is hands down the worst Batman movie ever made, and my second worst movie of the 90s. And my number one worst movie of the 1990s is Spice World. Yes, Spice World is awful. Nothing against the Spice Girls. Nothing against them at all. They have a few good songs. I don't mind the Spice Girls. They're okay. If you're a fan of it, that's cool. But just because you're a fan of the Spice Girls doesn't mean you're a fan of Spice World, the movie. Everyone should know this movie's fucking awful. It's awful. When I was a kid, this was always my least favorite movie of all time. That did change as the years went by and more crap came out, like The Last Airbender, Dragon Ball Evolution. But this movie was always my least favorite. I always despised this movie. I hated these characters. I hated the story. I hated the comedy. There was fucking aliens in this movie. Why was there aliens? And they make references to movies and they think they're clever, and they're not clever. They're not. Again, the Spice Girls, they're fine. They're likable girls, but in this movie, they're annoying. They're so annoying. And they're not even singing, like, big new songs. It's the Spice Girls songs. Might as well just go listen to their songs. You don't have to watch this awful movie that makes no sense, that has no good writing, no insightful or endearing or interesting or likable characters. Again, there's aliens. Why is there aliens in this movie? I can't get over that. And again, the stories are all over the place. It's jumbled, it's convoluted. And again, it makes no sense. And it makes no sense why this movie even exists. It's hands down one of my least favorite movies of all time, and hands down the worst movie of the 90s. So yeah, that was my top 10 worst movies of the 1990s from 1990 to 1999. So yeah, in the comment section below, please tell me, did you agree with the top 10 list? If not, give me your top 10 worst movies of the 1990s. Comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and join the dark side.